Right, you have seen these dresses, right? With this ruching across the top, super stretchy, long, 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 flowy. So this is a linen, or linen blend, I should say, that I got from Joann's. It was very inexpensive, and you don't need a pattern to make these. They're super simple. Now, you can sew them. You can cut the circumference and put one seam and sew it up the back and call it a day. In this case, I'm going to put seams on either side and put pockets in it and slits up the side. So this is for my daughter, and I did this actually over the phone with her, so it worked out pretty simple. And she's expecting, so this will work really well because it is stretchy, it will grow with her, and then also because it's gathered, there's lots of room in here. So her chest measurement is 40 and a half. So I need this to be 40 and a half, and I'm going to put straps on this. So I don't, normally this has negative ease and you would stretch this a little bit. So if you wanted to cut something for somebody that was 40 and a half, you'd probably make it somewhere around 38 inches as a finished garment. But I'm going to make it a 40 or 41 and keep it at that because it's going to fit her for a while through her pregnancy, and I'm going to put straps on it so it won't fall down. Normally, if you don't put straps on it, you definitely want this to fit. So the first thing I've done is I've folded this in half. And like I said, I'm going to make two sides, the front and the back. I'm going to make them even, not a problem. And I've lined up this edge here, and I'll neaten up this fabric at one point. And if it's, I'm going to make this 41. So half of 41 is 20 and a half. I'm just making it 41 to make it easy. 20 and a half. So I'm going to measure this at 20 and a half. And then I'm going to put a 1/2 inch seam allowance on either side. So I need to add a 1/2 inch for this side and a 1/2 inch for this side. So I need to make it 21 and a half inches. And that's going to be how my pieces are going to cut. All right, so I'm going to cut this, and I'm going to end up with two pieces that are 21 and a half inches long, and we'll take it from there. So I wanted to show you how to cut this. After I've measured it, I actually cut through the stretchy elastic on each piece, and now I'm just going to rip it because I want it to go down the grain. You can't rip this elastic, it won't work. See, I actually didn't cut that one all the way through. But think about it, the fabric is really wide, and then the shearing brings it in. This will give me a fairly straight line down the grain. Good enough for. All right, now that I've cut it up, and it's about the right length, she wanted it 44 inches long, so I don't have any extra fabric on the length. So I'm going to use that extra piece, and I'm going to cut out 4 pockets. I'm just using another pocket pattern that I have that I like. And then I will take the front piece of that pattern. This happens to be the McCall's jumpsuit. And I'm gonna take the piece from that pattern. Let's see, is this it? Yep. And line this up to see where the pocket is. So this goes to the underbust. So this goes here, and then mark. So now I can use these markings, right? I can use the marking on the tissue for the pocket and the marking on the tissue for the jumpsuit, and I know where the pockets are supposed to go. And yeah, just use this pattern to cut out 4 pockets. So I have this little bit of extra fabric, and I'm going to use some straps, the shoulder straps from a Vogue 2037, because I like the width of these. I'm going to cut out 2 of those. They need to be interfaced. You want to get some tricot interfacing and interface those. And then I'm also going to cut out 4 pockets from McCall's 8457 because I like the size of the pocket, and add those to my mashup pattern hack for this cute little dress. All right, here are my straps. If you don't have a pattern that you like, I cut them 20 inches long by 4.5 inches wide, and then I used a tricot interfacing. You're going to fold them in half, right sides together, and just stitch them along this long side here. Because this is linen, I'm finishing all the edges. It's very ravelly. So I sewed that, and then I overlocked it, turned it inside right, pressed it so the seam is in the center of the back, and then I overlocked each of the edges. You could use a step zigzag or a finishing seam on your machine. So there is my strap. It's nice and wide. You put a bra underneath it, so that works really, really well. I also overlocked the sides all the way down and across the bottom because all those little strings were driving me bananas. But I wanted to show you something to keep in mind. When I cut this, the little chains that hold this shirring together started to come undone. You can see that there's like little loops there, so it's coming undone, and that will unravel all the way across. So I used my knit stitch and just stitched over that so it would keep it in place and stop it from unraveling all the way across, because that's going to ruin your dress. There was a couple others further down, and I just used my overlocker to finish those, or they'll be cut in the seam allowance. But it's something that you certainly want to keep in mind as you move forward. So I have marked my pocket, the notch on my pocket with the corresponding notch on the pattern piece. I just overlaid a pattern that I liked where the pockets go. And now I'm going to stitch all 4 pockets on all the way around the dress like we would normally put a pocket on. All right, this little dress is coming together in no time. I have stitched on my pockets. I just used the edge of my presser foot 1/4 inch seam allowance to stitch them on to the right side of the garment. And then, if you've never sewn pockets before, or you need a little refresher, we're just going to talk about the right way to sew a pocket. So I've stitched it on, and then, oops, it's the back side. I've stitched the pocket on, then I pressed the pocket and the seam allowance out, so they're all pressed in the same direction. And then I'm going to understitch. I'm going to stitch the seam allowance to the pocket, and you can see it's not on the garment. And basically what I'm doing is I'm catching the seam allowance to that part of that pocket. And what that's going to do when I turn this in, because this is where my hand is going, it's going to give me this beautiful edge on my pocket, and it will help keep the pocket from popping out, which is like one of the most annoying things, right? So yes, that's for pockets. And I'm going to finish understitching these, but after I do that, I'm going to put them together, right sides together. And for this dress, I'm going to start here. Now, because this finish is all done, you want to be very, very careful that these seams up here match. You don't want to have the top of your dress kind of like that with a seam allowance. So you want to make sure that those match. And then I'm going to match up my pockets. I'm going to stitch down to the top of my pockets. And I'm going to stitch down once I get to the pocket. So here's my pocket. I'm going to stitch down maybe an inch or so, 3/4 of an inch, and back stitch, because I want that secure, because this is open in here. Then I'm going to go all the way around my pocket, and same thing with the bottom. When I line these up, I'm going to stitch up here about 1/2, 3/4 of an inch from the edge, back stitch, and go all the way down. And you want to make sure that you bypass that stitching that you did, right? You want to, when you come up here and sew, you want to get to the right side of the right meaning correct side of that stitching, because you don't want to see that stitching when you open up the seam. And I am going to leave slits on this. So I'm going to sew this down and leave about an 18-inch slit at the bottom on each side. And I'll show you how to finish off the edges. She wanted this 44 inches long. The other thing that I did is I basted the straps on the front because I need her to try it on. So I did them 5.5 inches from the side, And I just did a basting stitch inside along this top edge here because I want this ruffle. It's a pretty ruffle. I want the ruffle to show. And then I'll just pin the back. So once she tries it on, we can sew this and sew the back till it's the right length. And we're done. This is a pretty easy dress and it's super trendy. So I suggest you get a couple of yards of this. For this dress, I got 2 yards. I'd have to go back and look. I think I got 2 yards for this dress, and by the time I cut out the pockets and the straps and everything, I pretty much used most of it. So I probably could have gotten away with 1 3/4 yards. It depends on how much of this top part that you need. You know, make sure you measure that. And if you're going to make a short dress, then you'll have room at the bottom to cut out the straps and the pockets. But if you're going to make it floor length like this one is, then get a little extra because you're going to need some of the unless you do a contrast, you're going to need some of this for the pockets and the straps, or no straps. Maybe you go no straps and then it's not an issue. Yeah, so we're going to sew up the sides and hem it, and this puppy is ready to be worn. All right, we are finished. A couple of things for finishing. I wanted to show you for the side seams, because this can poke out a little bit. I just ran a stitch. I opened up the side seam and ran a stitch across here. So it looks really nice from the front. And then it'll look even better if I got rid of these little, you know, I have a self-cutting machine and it leaves little tiny tails. Okay, so it really looks nice from the front and it's not poking you in the side. So I did that to both the sides. And then I ended up cutting off 5 inches for the hem. So this side slit, instead of being 18 inches, ended up being 13, and that she's fine with that. And I just turned the hem, and you want to turn the hem first and then turn the side slits, because that way if it opens from the side, you have this really nice look instead of having the hem. And literally, I sewed, to finish this seam, you sew up and all the way up to the top and across and then back down again. So there's nothing tricky or crazy about that. And yeah, this dress is done. I'm gonna press it and take some photos, and then maybe next week we'll have pictures of her in it, but right now we'll put it on the Judy and take some photos of it. It looks amazing. I'm so happy with it. So quick. You definitely need to give one of these a shout out for a try.